So the clip you just saw was entirely shot on the iPhone 14 Pro. Obviously, it would have been better if it was shot on a camera, but not everybody has a camera and everybody has to start somewhere. A lot of people have an iPhone, and that's why in today's video I'll go through the settings with you. I'll tell you what each setting does, and by the way, this video is split into 3 chapters. First one is the settings, second one is the composition and what to do while you're shooting, and the third part is editing. So this video has a chapter for everyone. If you just want to know the optimal settings and you don't want to start editing, it's maybe too much for you, this video is still gonna provide you some value. So let's actually start with the settings. The first setting we're going to start with is record video. Here, we'll activate 4K 30. The reason for that is 4K 24 seems somewhat choppy on the iPhone for whatever reason, and 4K 60 is just not suitable for cinematic video. If you want to slow down your video, 4K 60 is totally fine. But if you're aiming for a cinematic type of video, 4K 60 is just not suitable. Then we're going to scroll down and activate enhanced stabilization. By activating enhanced stabilization, you're barely gonna lose out on quality, however your video is gonna be much more stable. Then we're gonna activate the lock white balance. The reason for that is the iPhone is always trying to expose to the scene you're shooting, and when the scenes are changing, it always changes the white balance, and that will instantly give it away that the video was shot on the iPhone. Also, it will make color grading much harder. So for that reason, we're gonna activate that. Then we're gonna deactivate action mode and lower light. The reason for that is action mode is very good at stabilizing your video in good light. However, when the light gets dim, action mode becomes completely useless, and activating the settings will not balance it out. You're just gonna end up with a grainy video and it's not gonna be well stabilized anyway. Next setting I like to deactivate is HDR video. I just don't like how the iPhone processes HDR. It just ends up looking too fake and it instantly gives it away that the video is shot on the iPhone. And it will also make the color grading part much harder, so for that reason I usually deactivate HDR video. The next setting we're going to deactivate is auto frame rate per second. The reason for that is the iPhone will try to balance the low light with a lower frame rate. For example, you set the frame rate at 60 FPS, the iPhone will actually bring that down to whatever it thinks is right for the lower light, and that will completely mess up your video because your frame rate is going to be all over the place. Next, we're gonna go back to the camera settings. The settings for cinematic video are gonna be the same, and for slow motion I usually don't use this setting at all, so I'll leave it at where it is. Next, we're gonna go into formats. Here we'll set it at high efficiency because that's already compatible with most devices. I have never had any compatibility issues with that, so that's the reason I'll set it to high efficiency, because that will save you a lot of space. You can set it to most compatible if you want to. That will fill up your space a lot faster, but if for whatever reason your iPhone videos are not compatible with the device you're watching them on or editing them on, maybe this setting is right for you. If we scroll down, you see Apple ProRes here. I usually don't use that ever. On the iPhone 15 Pro and newer, there will be an option for Apple Log, and what these options do is they make it easier for you to color grade and edit the footage. But we're not going to use Apple ProRes because that takes a lot of space, and since this is an iPhone 14 Pro, I don't have the option for Log. If you have an iPhone 15 Pro and you actually want to learn how to color grade your videos, I would recommend you use Log. But if you don't have any clue about editing and color grading, I would recommend you leave this option off for now. Right in the middle we can see the settings for ProRAW. That's actually for the photo settings, and if you want to know what are the optimal settings for photos on the iPhone, you can watch this video I made, but for this video we'll cover the video settings only. After formats, we'll go into preserve settings, so our settings don't reset every time we open the camera app. Here you can just copy my settings and I'll tell you what these settings do when we go into the camera app. If we scroll down a bit, we'll see record stereo sound. Activate that option, it will make your video sound a bit better, and some very important settings are actually in the composition tab. Here we're gonna activate the grid and the level. If you want to, you can also activate mirror front camera, it's up to you, and the same also goes for view outside the frame. For me, it just helps me compose better. However, for some people that might be distracting, and if that's the case for you, you can just deactivate this option. So since we covered all the settings, we're going to camera app and see what we can adjust there. So now that we're in the camera settings, there's a lot of things that we can do here. Let's start with the exposure. Mine is set to -1.3, and the reason for that is the iPhone is constantly trying to overexpose. So by setting the exposure at -1.3, we'll try to balance that out, and by doing that, we'll have a more pleasing picture. and it won't be a dead giveaway that the video is shot on the iPhone. Next is ProRes. As I said, we're not going to be using that on the iPhone 14 Pro because it's just going to eat up a lot of space, and most apps will be compatible with the video coming from the iPhone anyway, and it's not going to be a problem editing that. If you have an iPhone 15 Pro or better and you're confident in your color grading skills, or you want to learn how to color grade properly, then I'd recommend you use Log. Other than that, there's not many options left here. Next, we'll head over to the right, and here we have action mode. Action mode crops in your video, making it a 2.8K video instead of 4K, but by doing that, it digitally stabilizes your video. So for example, if you're running but you want to have a stable video, you can activate action mode and that will stabilize your video. As you can see, action mode defaults to the ultra wide lens, and the reason for that is, as I said, it crops in your video. So to compensate that is jumping to the ultra wide lens, but the problem with that is that the ultra wide lens can capture a lot of light, so we're gonna switch to the 1 lens here. The 1x lens has the best quality, and it actually has active stabilization built into the lens itself, so there's not a lot of reason to use the action mode with the 1x lens. In my opinion, the action mode is best used with the 2x and 3x lenses, because these lenses don't have built-in stabilization, and by using action mode it will make your video much smoother coming out of the 2 and 3x lenses. Next, we'll move over to the cinematic mode. As you can see, in the cinematic mode I have the same settings. The one downside with cinematic mode is you can't use action mode and cinematic mode together, so you'll have to choose between them. And if you want to use cinematic mode, make sure to set the f-stop at around 5.6 or 6.3. That way the fake blur of the iPhone will not look as fake, and once you color grade your footage, it will look more like a professional camera instead of an iPhone. So now that we have gone over the settings, let's move to the chapter 2, and I'll tell you all about how to shoot on your iPhone. And the first and also the most important thing about shooting on your iPhone is learning the composition. So now that we have activated the grid, you can start using the rule of thirds, meaning that you either put a subject on the middle or on the one of the thirds. That alone will make your video coming from the iPhone much better, even if you don't apply the settings I told you about, because composition is the key of a good frame. If you don't have good composition, no amount of color grading or right settings will help you get a better video out of the iPhone. So start using the grid. If you have never used the grid, try to place your subject in the middle. It's going to be the easiest for you to learn, and by doing that alone, it will massively improve your video coming up from your iPhone. The second tip to make your video look better is to have stable video. Nobody wants to look at shaky video unless it's shaky for a reason. Like if you're shooting an action movie, then shaking can actually be positive, but if you're shooting regular cinematic video, you want your footage to be as stable as possible. To do that, you either have to shoot on the 1x lens because it has built-in stabilization, or you have to use action mode. So if you want to use it on the ultra wide lens, you'll need a lot of light, and especially so if you want to use action mode on the 2 and 3x lenses, because these lenses capture even less light than the ultra wide lens. However, don't forget that action mode crops in your video a lot, and it cuts it from 4K to 2.8K, and that can be a downgrade in quality on its own. So personally, my advice would be to not use action mode unless you have a very good light. Talking about the light, you should also avoid very harsh light. The iPhone doesn't do good in very harsh light, and the reason for that is the iPhone has a tiny sensor, and in harsh light it's trying to use all its computational power to make the video look better, and in the end it just looks fake. Next tip is cinematic mode. Not everything has to be shot in cinematic mode. Cinematic mode can be overused very fast, and it will only make your video look worse. There's a time and place for cinematic mode, and if you're shooting cinematic mode, you should aim for a higher f-stop. That way the video won't look as fake. In my opinion, cinematic mode works best with a telephoto lens, which is your 2 or 3x or 5x depending on what phone you have. But don't forget that cinematic mode also needs a lot of light, and the telephoto lenses also are poor at gaining light. So beware when using cinematic mode. The iPhone does its best when the lighting is soft, when you shoot on the 1x lens, and when you have a static frame. However, that doesn't mean that the iPhone is useless in other conditions. With the settings that we applied and with a good composition, the iPhone can do wonders. Also, when I have a moving frame, I usually try to zoom in or pull out, because these are the most used techniques when shooting cinematic video. However, what I've noticed that a lot of people usually do is they take their phone and start panning like that, and in my opinion that shot doesn't look cinematic at all. There's a time and place for that, but usually it's not the right choice. As I said, I usually shoot at 30 FPS. However, if you want some slower video, you can actually take that 30 FPS video, slow it down to 80%, and you'll kind of get that 24 FPS. But if you want to slow your video down even more, you can shoot at 60 frames per second, or you can also shoot at 60 FPS if you want to do some head talking videos like this one, for example. However, I will use 30 FPS for talking head videos because I like that motion blur that the 30 FPS gives you. So now that we have learned all that, let's move to the editing part. I use my iPad with LumaFusion for editing. LumaFusion is also available for the iPhone. However, you can use any computer or any apps that you want. The steps will usually be the same. You can even use CapCut if you want to. That's a free app that does a lot of things. As you can see, I've got my project here. Here's 3 iPhone videos that I've stacked up on each other. Let's see what we've got. The video on top is shot in cinematic mode, as you can see. The video in the middle is the establishing shot, and the video on the bottom is just for the detail. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna color grade them to make them look a bit more cinematic. To do that, there's 2 ways. First one is you're gonna color grade your video yourself, or you can download a lot from the internet. It's kind of like a color preset, and you can just apply it like a filter on your video, and it's gonna automatically color grade your video. You can find lots anywhere on the internet and you don't have to pay for them. There's some that cost money, but there's also a lot of free ones. In my case, I will be using LUTs. Also, you don't have to worry about compatibility because CapCut, a free app that a lot of people use to edit their videos, supports LUTs as well. In my case, I'm using LumaFusion. If you want to use LumaFusion, you can follow my steps, however, you don't have to. And to color grade this footage, I'm just gonna apply the LUTs that I have. To do that, we'll open each clip individually. As you can see, this is how they're stacked. However, we don't need the frame and fit, so we'll go into color grading. This is how it looks with a LUT applied. The one in the middle is the one we're color grading. It's looking a bit too saturated for my liking, so for that reason I'm gonna apply another setting on top of the LUT, which will desaturate the colors a bit, and this is what it ends up looking. I'll do the same for the rest of the videos. We're just gonna apply the LUTs, desaturate them a bit. We'll do that again. Here's how it looks with a LUT applied to the video, and we'll desaturate it a bit. And this is what we got. So this is how I color graded the cinematic at the beginning of this video. And as I said, you don't have to use an iPad or LumaFusion. You can use any other device or any other app that you want. If you want to, you can use DaVinci Resolve. It's much better at color grading than LumaFusion. However, if you just want to apply a LUT or a filter, let's say, you can just download the LUTs from the internet, and any video editing app should support the LUTs. So this is how I shoot cinematic video on the iPhone. If you find this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're interested in tech, please consider subscribing to this channel. If you have any questions left, please write them in the comments down below, and maybe consider watching some other videos that I've made. With that said, I'll see you in the next one.